I was born on the west coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, in a small little village. And the natural world was all around us. Now that I live in a city, and most of us supposedly, most human beings now live in cities or we're on our way to live in cities, we are somewhat divorced from the natural environment. And I think this is a problem when it comes to children, of course, because many children have absolutely no idea where food, for instance, comes from. And some of the more unpleasant aspects of food, such as the killing of animals, etc., the industrial food industry, if you will. So the natural environment is distant now, isn't it? So how do we return to the natural environment on an ongoing basis? Well, I think the very first thing we have to do is we have to encourage our friends, our family, our students to spend time in that world, in parks, in things along this nature, right? Real parks, forested parks, wilderness parks, if you will. And the second proviso as well, is I would think stop killing everything in the natural world, from mosquitoes to cockroaches to bugs to bees. We have to just stop picking these poor creatures off one by one. My house is clean, quite clean, so there are virtually no cockroaches. But the other morning, I came into my bedroom just before I left, and there was a tiny cockroach on the wall, and my natural inclination was to remove her immediately, flush her down the toilet or whatever. And I thought to myself, no, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to start to really respect the natural world around me. And as human beings, we have now truly taken over nature. And if you think of the Gaia hypothesis by Dr. Lovelock, this suggests to us that every creature, every rock, human beings, all the rest of it, were all associated with Mother Earth, with Gaia. And Mother Earth, obviously, is now quite put off. The Anthropocene is before us now that we've come to dominate nature itself. And that's a pretty scary statement. I remember some 50 years ago when I used to fly with my father. My father used to lease a tiny airplane, 4-passenger airplane with a pilot and 3 passengers, float plane. And we would go up to some remote logging camp that he was responsible for. Maybe we'd fly an hour and a half, 2 hours, way up the coast of British Columbia. And there were trees forever. It was impossible for a 4 or 5-year-old child to believe that the forest would ever be cut. How could it ever be cut down, ever be removed? But it was. In my lifetime, the forests of British Columbia have been virtually cut at least once. Of course, there are some so-called old-growth forests that are protected, but they are a very, very small percentage of the forests that remain now in British Columbia. And this is certainly true worldwide, from the Amazon rainforest all the way to the boreal forests. So we've changed nature totally, haven't we? And I think we have to sit back and say, is this a good thing? Probably not. So how do I begin to assess nature? Well, I guess the very first thing to do is to get oneself to a park. And as opposed to just walking in the park, take your shoes and socks off and put your feet right on the grass. This is something that Sadhguru of Isha fame, this is what he suggests. Put your feet right on the ground and on the grass, and within 2 or 3 minutes, you will feel more bonded. And it's amazing. It actually works. It bonds you to the ground. You feel much more relaxed. You truly do. And then, the second thing that is a really good suggestion that I was reading the other day is make a point at least once a week to go for a very long walk in nature, if at all possible. And barring that, get to a park that is quite well forested and just take a walk, a long walk, perhaps even alone. Just listen to the sounds of the wind blowing in the trees. Perhaps the birds singing with their beautiful voices, right? Just listen. Listen to nature. Such an important thing, isn't it? Because we will have to live on this earth with nature. We do need a partnership. At the moment, I think, at the beginning of the 21st century, we talk a lot about nature, but we still really do not have a partnership. We are really exploiting it. And many times, the native peoples, when they get control of nature, legally or otherwise, they exploit it as well. So I think in general, indigenous people, not always, but many indigenous people also tie into capitalism rather quickly, don't they? So think to yourself, how am I going to bond with the natural world? Well, I'm going to stop killing the things that are around me, the spiders, the ants, the cockroaches, as I've said. I'm going to take a walk in nature, and I'm going to say that I am truly a part of this natural world, and I will one day lay in it in some fashion. I will someday be, whether I want to or not, I'm going to be a piece of this natural world. And you know what they say? You know what they say. Critical thinking is truly everything, especially if I want to come to some type of harmony with the world and with its beings. And critical thinking is great, truly great. You take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. Dave here. Today is July 18th. This is the 27th day of our El Camino journey. The weather today has been about the same as yesterday. It's been cooler than some of the previous days, with a little bit of sun in the afternoon. Overall, it has been very comfortable. We went from Ponferrada in the morning to Villafranca del Bierzo in the afternoon. And we walked through a lot of vineyards, and we saw a lot of grapes. Other parts of the journey took us through downtown Ponferrada and the outskirts, where we walked along the side of the road. Now, thinking back towards my youth, I had a summer job one year where I worked at a bookstore. And there was a guy who worked there. He was an older man. His name was Gary. And he used to always say to us, the younger people working there, he'd say, life, it's all about the decisions you make. So every day, perhaps to go into work, you turn right, you leave your driveway, you turn right, and you drive down the street. What happens if someday, instead of turning right, you go left? And he used to say this all the time. And I think back then, we were quite young and we didn't really understand what he was talking about so much. But the fact is, even the smallest decisions really do change your life. For example, Leon and I have been walking this El Camino trip for quite some time. And 1.5 or 2 weeks ago, we departed ways with a man who was walking with us, Rodrigo. And once we said our goodbyes, we did not see him again. He decided to stay in an albergue in a small town, and we decided to walk on to the next town. And once you walk on, you get out of sync with the other person as the miles or the kilometers between become greater and greater. Well, the last couple of days, Leon and I have continued to follow our schedule, but we've only been walking 15, 20, 22 kilometers a time. And today, as we were walking towards Villafranca, who did we run into but Rodrigo? That we caught up to him, or he caught up to us, and we had a chat. If we had stayed behind or walked on, even 1 or 2 towns further at one of our stops, we would not have had this chance encounter with this man whom we met previously. It's all about these little things in life, the decisions we make. Another example from my youth. When I was in university, I worked at a winery in Pennsylvania, a small winery, and I got to befriend one of my colleagues. She was an older woman, probably in her 50s, who was originally from Taiwan, but she moved to America because she had married an American. We struck up conversation one day and became quite friendly whilst working because she had studied in Germany whilst in university. And I had studied in Germany as well when I was in university. So despite our age differences at the time, she was in her 50s, I was in my 20s, we could kind of relate to each other, and we used to practice our German in our downtime. Anyways, this friendship started because we both made the small decision to go to Germany for some time and to learn German. Then I finished university and I was looking for a job. And I couldn't find a job. I was applying for teaching positions in Europe and South America, and I couldn't find anything. And the woman, Jean, she said to me, well, Dave, you should go to Taiwan. You could find a job there. And she was right. As soon as I had started looking for a job online, quickly I received some offers and away I went. Something that completely changed my life. And in fact, I wouldn't be walking the El Camino now if it weren't for the fact that I was working in that winery and struck up with conversation with this woman from Taiwan, all because we had the shared knowledge of this other, to us, foreign language. So the small choices we make in life, they all add up and influence us, our decisions, where we work, how we think, and what we do, and where we ultimately end up in our life. It may seem minor at the time, but actually, these minor decisions aren't very minor at all. Now to Leon.
Raises a good point, doesn't he? That we make decisions in life. But on a bit of a more negative spin, we must take responsibility for all the decisions we make, rightly or wrongly. And many times we make the wrong decision, as you probably know. There are no regrets in life, there are only lessons. So perhaps you get pushed into a career. Many people have told me that their parents pushed them into a certain perhaps career, a certain amount of certain type of study, and they just resented it. Small story. I had a friend from South Africa who went to medical school for 1 year. A very good student, and he did very well in medical school. And his parents were thrilled. There's going to be a doctor in the family. And then in the second year, they had to deal with the cadavers, with the bodies, the dead bodies that are soaked in formaldehyde to preserve them. And he couldn't take the smell, and he couldn't take the cutting either. And he began to get sick on a daily basis. And his professor said, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." But it wasn't fine, and he finally quit medical school. And his parents became extremely upset. He lost his relationship with his father. But then eventually he went back to school and he got a PhD in music, which was his first love. And I met him in Taiwan, and he loved music. So there's a decision that was a bad decision because we were pushed by our parents. Now, our parents love us, but parents are always conservative. They want the best for you, they believe, which is safety, but it might not be what you want. And it is your piece of life. My piece of life does not belong to my mother, my father, my brothers, my sister, etc. It belongs to me. That's the hardest thing to realize. And I think when you're on the El Camino, you're silent many periods of time because of the arduousness of walking, and you're forced to reflect on your life and the life that has brought you to this point right now as you're putting one foot in front of the other. And you must accept that I made those decisions. I made them. And conversely, as long as I'm alive, I can change them because I only know the now. The past is gone and the future is illusory. So I know right now, and I can gather my forces to be able to push on. So whatever decision you make, David and I often talk about critical thinking and time, which is extremely important because if you train your mind to think, and this is in theory why one goes to university, to learn how to learn. And once you learn how to learn, you're going to think about you, the beautiful you. There's no one like me. There never has been, and there never will be. But I must open me. No one can do it but me, and that's great. And I can make those positive decisions that bring me to this point. And David's point is well taken. I made the decision to visit my son, to come to Taiwan, to attend a church, and that's how I met David. So those were decisions I made. And without making the decision at 19 years old to leave my little village in Canada, I would never be talking to you now. Back to Dave.
Yes. So Leon's point is very good as well, that we do need to take responsibility for our own decisions. And sometimes these decisions, although at the time we might think we've made the right decision, discover it's not the right decision, but then ultimately a lot of these decisions, these bad decisions or life lessons, they do indeed straighten out in the end and help us figure out who we are and what we actually want in life.
Please reflect whenever you make a major decision. A wonderful situation from Mark Twain, a wonderful idea is you get a piece of paper, blank paper, and you divide it in two. You draw a line down the middle, and you take the decision. If I decide whatever that it is, you write, this is the result, good result, bad result. And at the end, you can compare and you can then draw your own conclusion. So you take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.